Welcome IWE members to the second webinar of this year. It was great to see many of you in person, a real oddity for me, for the panel discussion on diversity and inclusion hosted by Marsh last month. A really great event. Great to see you. So today's topic, how to achieve perfect imperfection. I was inspired by the lyrics from John Legend's song, All of Me. Don't worry, I'm not going to break out in song. It's something like, love all of you, love your curves and all your edges, all your perfect imperfections. And that's what really inspired me for the title of today's talk. Thinking about our careers, you certainly start in the right place when you think about, well, what are my longer term goals and ambitions? But they'll remain just that, i.e. goals in your mind or on a piece of paper, if you don't take the plunge and embrace new challenges. Embracing new challenges requires one key skill: recognizing that you're imperfect by definition. As a human, we're imperfect. You've got to be willing to accept this imperfection and not let it hold you back. There's so many promising careers that can get stuck because of this perfectionism goal. So the key is how to achieve perfect imperfection. On a recent webinar, I asked the audience, how often do they make mistakes? And the response was just shocking, a whopping 0%. There's a number of problems with this on a number of levels, which we'll delve into. But here, perfection is not the goal. So just a quick introduction. I'm Christine Brown-Quinn, so former international finance executive and now career expert. And this is me at a book signing event at Banco BHD in the Dominican Republic, where I'm signing copies of my book, Step Aside Superwoman. This was a really interesting event because it was actually a JV between MasterCard and Banco BHD, and it targeted specifically professional women. Speaking of the book, Step Aside Superwoman, this topic of imperfection is really a very personal journey for me, and it's what inspired me to write the book, Step Aside Superwoman. When I realized that by trying to do everything, I was actually achieving very little, I changed the goalpost. I'll mention more about my own journey as we go through the webinar here. So, warning. Perfection is dangerous to your health. Gosh, I was thinking all along, that's what I was striving for. Isn't the goal perfection, to get everything right? Well, let's take a look at what a perfectionist is. A perfectionist is someone who gets lost in the minutia and loses sight of the important things, the bigger picture, in their career as well as in their personal life. Strategic thinking goes out the window completely. And you can hear ourselves defending these perfectionist tendencies, right? I used to do it. We come up with all kinds of reasons why we're not able to achieve the things we want to achieve. And that's the irony. We do have higher goals that we want to achieve, but we're stuck in a place that doesn't allow us to actually achieve those more meaningful goals because we're trying to be perfect. Perfectionism is crowding out the ability to focus on the things that have an impact. So I'm going to kick off with a poll here. Here we go. So the question is, which of these apply to you? So it's a multiple choice here. So others don't appreciate the effort I put into my work. The sheer amount of work is overwhelming at times. Sometimes I feel confused about where to focus my efforts. I don't have enough time to deliver to the standard that I want. And I sometimes find it hard to delegate. So click as many as apply to you. And don't worry, there isn't a perfect answer here, right? This is just about thinking about how you feel at the moment about this whole topic. We had a great subscription level, so there was a lot of interest in this topic. It looks like all of you have voted. Let me close and share that. So we've got 70%, I don't have enough time to deliver to the standard that I want. 59%, sometimes I feel confused about where to focus my efforts. 60%, the sheer amount of work is overwhelming. 51%, I sometimes find it hard to delegate things. These are really high percentages. So we're all feeling the pinch. And 36% say others don't appreciate the work that I'm putting into that. So the question is, how do you maintain your health? If perfectionism is a health risk, how do you maintain your health? You have to be willing to take imperfect action. Getting something done at 70 to 80% of 100% is better than the procrastinator who waits for perfection to act. So begin living and working with a mindset that you'll never get to that 100%. It's that perfection. Start adopting an attitude of I've got it done. I've got it done and it has an impact. That's good enough. It's good enough because there will always be a tomorrow to improve upon what's been done, and also sharing and getting feedback from others. And we're going to talk about what happens when you get so deep into your task and perfecting it that actually there's a downside to that in terms of involving others. So here's a question for you, worth considering. So what's worth more? Something that you finish, say, 70 to 80% rather than 100%, or something that takes twice as long to get done, but it was closer to that 100%. What is the right answer? If you can put some thoughts on chat. So let me repeat the question. So what's worth more? So two options. One is you're getting it done, 70 to 80%, but it's done. The second one is you're taking twice as long to get it done, but it's at a higher standard. Yeah, good, some good good feedback here. So, Mary's saying option one, get it done. 80-20 is more productive, says Allie. Definitely second choice here. That's the the 100, taking twice as long, but the 100%. That's from Stella. So a real mix here. What's the answer? Well, it depends, right? It depends on the task. Sometimes it's something that's so critical that you need to get it spot on, like landing an airplane, right? You don't want to make mistakes there. And in our work context, when there's lots of deadlines and things are moving really fast, sometimes if you wait until it's 100% done, then the value becomes zero. It doesn't even become 70 to 80%. It becomes zero. Our worlds are moving so fast. Why is that? Because it's too late now to use that information. It's no longer relevant. Perhaps the discussions have moved on. Perhaps now another option is being explored to the business problem. Your work no longer has impact because it wasn't delivered in the time frame that was needed. So everybody has moved on. So the challenge is for you to figure out which tasks deserve the 100% effort and which don't. So does this look familiar? Just do it. Just do it. If any of you have teenagers, you'll use that phrase a lot. Just do it. Enough of the back chat. Well, interesting. Nike's market share jumped from 18% to 43%, and their sales exploded from $800 million a year, this was in 1988, to upwards of $9.2 billion in 1998, so over a 10-year period, as a result of this slogan. Why was it so impactful? It tapped into a universal problem. We tend to overthink things. And in the world of fitness, everyone has to start at the same point, right? It's wherever you are. The alternative is to do nothing. overwhelm can easily take over. As you know, I think I'm never going to be super fit, so that, you know, why even try that? That's just so far away from where I am now. So you do nothing rather than maybe breaking the goal down to something that's more achievable, you know, more realistic, something that you can attain. And this is what happens in the work environment too. Perfectionism, which can be a strength, but it can also be a major weakness unless it's controlled in the right way. So let's take a look at that. So what's the potential side effects of perfectionism? We said it can be dangerous to your health. So what are some of those side effects? One is being hard on yourself, right? It affects confidence. You know, you focus on what you haven't done rather than what you have done. And this focus, you know, it can also be on what didn't go well, right, rather than what did go well. And our brains, they seem to be hardwired to exaggerate the negative. So actually the things that didn't go well, it really wasn't as big a deal as we think, but it keeps churning on in our minds, and we're really tough on ourselves. The next one is high expectations. This is what I refer to as the superwoman syndrome that I suffered from. I really did suffer from this. And delegation becomes increasingly difficult. You turn into a control freak, right? You really struggle to delegate, or what I call subcontract, as you expect others to meet the same standards as you have. And hey, granted, you're really terrific in a lot of areas. And I'm sure that the people that you delegate things to don't do it as well as you. But the fact is you can't do it all, so you have to delegate. And if you have these high expectations and you're not letting go and you're micromanaging, well, you're not really getting the benefits of delegating, right? You're still involved. Plus, you're creating a negative atmosphere. You know, you think of your own roles. Do you like to be micromanaged by your manager or your team? No, you hate it. What else? It affects behavior. You can become super sensitive to any kind of comments about your work, and you become really difficult to deal with. And that's what I was referring to earlier. Is if you're not you know, if you're so hooked on you do things perfectly and you don't let others kind of comment, then you know you're kind of stuck on your own. You're not getting that benefit of feedback. You know, we've worked so hard on something till it was, quote, perfect. So we really become attached to it. You know, how could anyone possibly criticize my work or have comments or, quote, feedback, given how hard I've worked? You know, you do sweat the small stuff. You know, you allow the minor details to have too much importance. Another potential side effect, it reduces executive presence. And this is something that comes up a lot. You know, your language becomes very insular and protective, and it makes you look junior. It makes you look junior. You become more cynical, negative, defensive, and it's difficult to keep emotions to one side. And if you think of leadership, you know, leaders really keep their cool, and you know they're positive. So things become too personal when you're a perfectionist, and it depletes your executive presence. You lose your flexibility. And as I said, it's certainly not a good situation for a leader to be in. And then finally, overwhelm and stress. The world is complex today. We have so many demands on our time, both personally and professionally. Nothing can be 100% controlled. It's just impossible. Things are moving too quickly. You know, and you're putting enormous pressure on yourself by thinking, I've got to do it all. So the stress is self-inflicted. So let's be clear, you will never reach that perfection, at least not this side of paradise, as they say. So the bottom line here is perfectionism can be an asset if used in the right circumstances, but not all situations deserve that kind of effort. Now, this is really important. The biggest downside of perfectionism, it's one of the leading killers of career progression. That might seem a bit tough, but it's absolutely true. Why? Because you have your head down. You're concentrating on working so hard to make that work perfect, that task, that project. The problem is exactly that. Your head is always down. You don't see what's happening around you. And this is so critical, again, for today's business environment. You have to keep, you have to be looking up, at least occasionally. What relevance do you have in to your department? What relevance does your department have to the new company strategy? What relevance does the company strategy have to what's happening in the wider macro environment? Right? You have to have your head up. You got to be looking around what's happening. I worked with a client, Laura, during one of our career strategy days a number of months ago, and her story was she wasn't put on the list to make partner at her firm, which she had been working at since law school. And this was really devastating to her, as she had devoted her entire career to this firm. She was also shocked by the news that she wasn't put up for partner. The thing is, she described how she felt overwhelmed with the amount of work that she, that she was given and the work environment. She was personally doing 100%, striving for that perfectionist level for every case or project that she was given. Now, you probably see where I'm going here. But the issue, of course, was she wasn't prioritizing the different pieces of work. Which client was more important? Which sector was more important, right? Which sector maybe the law firm was trying to specialize in? Maybe that's where the growth was. She wasn't thinking where she could have the most impact. Meanwhile, her colleagues were much better at meeting deadlines. Interesting. So she's not meeting the deadline. She's doing each project to this 100% standard, or as much as she could, but she's not meeting the deadlines. So colleagues are meeting deadlines, and on top of that, they somehow find time to self-promote and let others know how they can contribute to the firm as a partner. They were effectively lobbying for the promotion. So I think that's a really good, Laura's story is a really good story about how perfectionism can really kill the career progression. Okay, let me launch another poll here. Okay, so the question is, how often do you focus on your next career move? Is it never, sometimes, not nearly enough, perhaps too much? Maybe you need to focus more on the day-to-day tasks, or not as much as others? How often do you focus on your next career move? I'm going to give you a little insight as well as what I hear from, or what I've heard over the years from male colleagues, and also watched how they, how they approached their job and their career versus many female professionals. Okay, it looks like you've all voted. Let me close that and share. So the lowest number, which doesn't surprise me, is 3%. Okay, so very few of you, feel that you're thinking about your next career move, too much. Not surprising. 9% say not as much as others. Okay, 41%. Say not nearly enough. 14% never. Oh, please, you've got to, after this webinar, that's got to change. You've got to think about your next career move. You're not being selfish. You're helping the organization, move, because if you're progressing, the organization progresses. 33% sometimes. So that's a pretty high stats there. So that's, well over 80% really need to be thinking more about what is their next career move. Great, thanks for that. Thanks for your honesty. Okay, let me hide that. So the question is, how come taking imperfect action works? The answer is because it feeds one of the 6 basic human needs. That's why it works. So what are these 6 human basic needs? And why do we do what we do? You may have seen this before. This is a diagram from Tony Robbins, the NLP guy. And here are the six basic needs. So let's start off with uncertainty, or certainty on the left. So let's start off with certainty. So we need assurance that we're gonna be safe. We're avoiding pain and we're gaining pleasure. We need certainty. But we also need, so to the right, we also need uncertainty and variety. The need for change and stimuli. Have you ever been in your role where you think, gosh, this is getting a bit monotonous. I can do this role with my eyes closed, right? It's too much certainty. You want a little uncertainty, where, the new project, right? The new project, how I can be stretching myself. Significance. This is about feeling unique and important, special. And then we have connection. And this one is more personal. It's a strong feeling of closeness with someone, a real personal connection or relationship. And then we have contribution at the bottom there, a sense of service, or you focus on helping someone or giving someone, and that feels really good. That's a human need. And of course, the last one, most importantly, is growth. So growth, when we talk about growth, we're talking about expanding our capability, our understanding, our capacity. And this is critical to career success as well. You have, if you don't have growth, you're not progressing. Not growing, if you're not growing, right, you're dying, you're stuck. There's no action, there's no growth. So by not taking action, we are denying ourselves of a basic human need. And that's, as I say, when we feel stuck, we're not stretching ourselves and we're not growing in our jobs. So I now want to look at another dynamic to consider, the consequences of adapting a fixed versus a growth mindset. This is actually from Dr. Carol Dweck, who is a world-renowned Stanford University psychologist. I read her book called Mindset: How You Can Fulfill Your Potential. Great book. And this is really the penultimate diagram for her. She really brings it all together here as well. So what is fixed mindset versus growth mindset? Well, let's take a look. So fixed mindset, you avoid challenges, right? You're fixed in your ways. Growth mindset, you embrace them. Yeah, I want to go after those new things, those things that it's a challenge. I haven't done those before, so I'm really going to have to put myself out there. Fixed mindset, give up easily. Well, I'm really comfortable doing this, and that seems a little difficult. So heck, I'm just giving up. Whereas growth mindset, you persist in the face of setbacks. My own personal side note here is that is where your greatest opportunity to learn is, when you're faced with those setbacks. It's really intense, but that's when you learn the most, if you're open to it. Fixed mindset, you see your effort as fruitless or worse. Whereas in a growth mindset, you see your effort as the path to mastery. So just think about it. It fits so nicely into this whole topic of perfectionism. It's not about getting it right. It's about the journey, right? It's about the journey to learning, to really mastering something. But it's the path, it's the journey. Fixed mindset, you ignore useful negative feedback. In fact, I would even argue with a fixed mindset, you're giving colleagues and bosses signals you're not open to feedback. Guess what? They're going to give you very little, because they're going to say, gosh, I don't want to talk to Susan because she, I'm going to get the backlash. So I'd rather not give her the feedback. And there are so many people in business that will shy away from that kind of conflict, right? Who wants to put themselves through that pain? So it's a very dangerous mindset to have. Versus the growth mindset, learn from criticism. Saying, when somebody points something out, saying something like, really thank you for taking the time, right? Thank you for taking the time. And hey, I'm realistic here. Sometimes somebody does give you feedback and you think, gosh, that was a little harsh. And you know what? If it's really harsh, maybe it's a little tough love. And again, you have to thank that person, a lot, because they have the courage that you're going to accept it and really benefit from it. Fixed mindset. You feel threatened by the success of others. And I know, talking to and working with a number of professional women, that this comes up a lot in terms of their managers, right? They feel like, gosh, I'm stuck because my manager doesn't seem to be threatened by my success, versus a growth mindset. You find lessons of inspiration in the success of others. And again, the leadership lesson here, that's a good leader, right? You're really celebrating the success of somebody else. So I'm going to launch another poll here. Here we go. So the question for you is, which mindset are you adopting in this current business environment? Is it the fixed mindset, the growth mindset, perhaps a mix but more fixed than growth, a mix but more growth than fixed, or you just need a little more time to think about this, which is fair enough? This is such a great topic to follow on from the January webinar, leading from within, because it really does give you a lot of insight into how to be a good leader as well as an effective professional. I'll give you another minute. Okay, let's close that and share. So some of you need more time to reflect. That's great. I will be sending the link to the recording after the webinar to people that attended as well, so you have time to review this slide as well. 1% say they have the fixed mindset, and that's great to recognize that. That's why these polls are really good, because it forces you to kind of self-reflect. How am I behaving? And you're giving yourself a report card, but nobody else sees it, which is also very useful. 45% say they're doing a mix, but more growth than fixed. Fantastic. 16% have the growth mindset. That looks like a very positive career trajectory. And then 33% a mix, but more fixed than growth. So obviously some room to improve there. So I'm going to hide that. So as I said, it's a really great topic, this whole topic of perfectionism and leadership. So let's look at leadership and the growth mindset. And just think of the difference you can make as a leader when you adapt the growth mindset. You're creating a healthy corporate culture. That's what this is about, culture. And culture drives everything. It drives performance. People are focused on learning rather than the fear of making mistakes. The leadership mindset is so important in today's business environment, where we need, creative thinking, innovation, collaboration to come up with solutions to clients' problems. Today's business world really needs the growth mindset because of the fast pace of change. Recently, I saw a panel discussion on TV with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. It was really interesting. He was commenting on his own leadership style, and he called it the zero cost of discussing issues with him. What does that mean? He makes sure others know that he's going to be open to listen to them, especially when they disagree with him. In fact, he encourages disagreement. So the Supreme Court Justice, he has his opinions, but he wants to make sure that they're solid. He wants people to challenge his position, as it helps to clarify and solidify his own thinking. So he says zero cost, because there's no cost to having a dialogue with me. I'm not going to bite you. I'm not going to jump down your throat. I'm not going to be aggressive. I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen. So instead of getting too attached to an idea, which we talked about earlier, you're so attached to that idea or that work or that task because you just devoted so much time to it, trying to make it perfect. it's hard to let go. He's actually looking for others to challenge his idea to ensure that it's as sound as it can be. And I think that's a very useful leadership lesson. So how do we grow? So let's continue with our leadership theme, the LEAD acronym. So the L, learn and let go. And we've got to be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. Let go of the small stuff. And this was the big aha moment in the earlier part of my career when I started to have a family. I realized that if I didn't let others help, that I'd never reach a senior level. I'd never have career progression because I couldn't possibly detach myself to what was happening at home. I also realized that I had to let others do things their way, not my way. And of course, that applies in the workplace as well. The other aha moment was not micromanaging, right? I had to let others do it their way, give them an opportunity to grow. So just like, you can think about it. So if I'm a leader and I want other people to be, to really enjoy their role, well, one of the 6 basic human needs is growth. So I've got to give them an opportunity to grow as well, especially those things that I can do with my eyes closed. Give somebody else the opportunity. And this obviously, these concepts apply both to work and your personal life. So, so the E is experiential learning. So it's about doing new things, jumping at the new experience, taking on risks, taking on things that you haven't done before. The A is for active listening. This is how we can really discover the shortcuts to things. Right? It's a really it's a great tip for career progression and sound leadership. You hear about issues sooner because you're listening to people. You hear ideas. Ideas maybe about how to solve things. Maybe you're working on a project and somebody else has had a similar issue. And then the D is doing instead of waiting. We seem to have a million excuses for waiting before we take action. And some of these may sound familiar. They certainly sound familiar to me. I'll wait until I get the next promotion before I fill in the blanks. I'll wait till my manager gives me my performance review before I, right? Wait. So this is a formula on how to grow. On the learn and let go, I also wanted to mention that I had the pleasure of speaking at the A.T. Kearney International Women's Day event last week, Stepping Up Together. And during the day, there was a panel discussion among a group of very successful career women. And one of the female executives was asked about, how does she, quote, have it all, the demanding job and the busy personal life. And what she said was, quote, not everything needs to be picked up. And again, she was thinking about her home environment and her work environment. You got to let it go. You got to let it go. Okay, let's do another poll here. So now that we've gone through the LEAD formula, do a little self-reflection. Which area could use more focus for you in order to grow? Is it the learn and let go, the experiential learning, the active listening, or doing instead of waiting? Which area do you think could use more focus? Great participation on the polls today. Thanks for that. It's the more feedback, the better, and also you're helping others because you're letting them know that perhaps they're thinking the same as you are, and that that gives you confidence. Okay, a few more clicks. I think we got everybody. Let me close that and share. So 38% say doing instead of waiting. Right. So the Nike slogan, just do it, really resonates. 32% learn and let go. 18% experiential learning, so taking that risk and doing the new experience, and then 12% active listening. And the active is really important there. It's really trying to grasp what someone is saying, not thinking about what you're going to respond to right away, not thinking about, oh, I need to read my text message. Really concentrating on the person that's speaking. So, when we're in the learning mode, it means there's growth. And this is key for our self-motivation as well. Because when we're growing and we're learning things and we're motivated. And I want to share with you a strategy here that I live by, and it really helped me break out of the superwoman syndrome. Think about managing your energy rather than managing your time. So I'm sure you've seen this efficiency curve in other settings, right? And the hard work or the longer you work, right, the return goes up. But then it reaches a point, so the efficient frontier, it reaches a point where it starts to level off. So what does that mean? It means it's best to move on to something else because the return you're getting for the effort is really minimal, right? It's really minimal. The 80-20 rule is at play here. And again, this efficiency curve applies to your professional life and your personal life. And what's interesting, when I wrote the book and I figured out that this is what I was doing, I actually found that there was scientific evidence for this. There was a write-up in the Harvard Business Review about managing your energy, not your time. And the review said, quote, "The science of stamina has advanced to the point where individuals, teams, and whole organizations can, with some straightforward interventions, significantly increase their capacity to get things done." So those interventions were about teams, about building fun into the workplace. It was that variety as well. So not doing the same task where then your return plummets. So the thing about taking imperfect action is it's an upward spiral. The more you're willing to grow by doing new things, the more you're willing to be open and seek feedback, the more impactful results you're going to be able to deliver. So it really is a virtuous circle. So before we take questions, I want to leave you with a thought of the day. And this is by Salvador Dali. Have no fear of perfection. You'll never reach it. And that's really the message here is we just cannot have that standard. It's impossible. Step aside, Superwoman. I'm not going to be Superwoman. That's absolutely impossible. So let me take some questions now. And just clicking through here. So here's a question from Karen. How do you know which pieces of your job to focus on? It's a really excellent point. And this goes back to the strategy, right? What is it? Remember the poll about the next career move. What's your strategy? Because unless you know what you are aiming for, you can't prioritize, right? You have to know, okay, this is where I want to go, and then you can decide, okay, what are the things to prioritize on? Now, the next level down, and you think, okay, well, I want to say, for instance, I'm a manager and I want to get to senior manager. Then you could say, okay, to get to senior manager then, if I look at the different things that are, quote, on my plate, what are the things that perhaps are most important to my manager or my department? And where will people actually see what I'm doing, where maybe visibility on that given project is better? That's the one to go for. Because if you're going to go to some project that doesn't seem to be, there's not a lot of excitement about it, it's not getting a lot of attention from senior management, it's kind of giving you a signal that should be deprioritized. Focus on the other stuff. So that's the key here is you have to know where you want to go next in order to in order to figure out what's the task that really should go to the top of my list. Here's a question from Brenda. Any tips how to ask for useful negative feedback? Well, one thing here, Brenda, is to make sure, think about how perhaps you've been reacting in the past, and is there anything that you can change in terms of your reaction, your body language, the actual words that you're using, because you have to almost establish a reputation that you're open to that negative feedback. So I would say that's the first point. The second point is to think about who in your network, and possibly somebody that isn't in your direct reporting line, so they don't have responsibility for looking at performance management, and doing reviews on you, but know you. Somebody in like that profile who you can trust and go to and say, hey, could we have coffee on Friday? I'd really like to get your feedback on on how the meeting went. And so then in your dialogue, make the first person feel at ease. Make them feel at ease so that they're going to share that feedback and say things like, I'd really be interested to know what I could do what I could do better. And you could even, depending on the person, you could use that as a self-promotion opportunity as well and say, I'm looking to become senior manager, so I want to make sure that the key things I need to be focusing on, I'm covering, so that I do get that promotion. So there's a couple strategies for you. Here's a question from Lee. Do you feel this applies to every stage of your career in equal measure? Lee, great question. I think that in the earlier stages, it's less important because your role is more has parameters around it, right? And it's very focused on the delivery. And that's what happens. And actually, this is one of the issues, is that we come out of school and university, and then we go into our jobs, and we're used to this, okay, I want to get an A, and an A is very achievable and transparent, and then we start our jobs, and we're getting an A in the technical stuff. But unless, so to your question, Lee, unless we then start to adapt this whole growth mindset and learning to let go and all those things to grow, what happens is we're going to get stuck in that junior level. So the more senior you become, the more important this is. And I often find from the women that I work with is, well, for law firms it's maybe a little earlier, maybe around the 5-year mark, because their degree is longer. But maybe 6 to 10 years, that's when it's really critical to make sure that you're prioritizing. So it's about strategy and prioritizing according to impact and energy, and energy. And here's a question from Stella. As you rightly said, the world is changing extremely fast, and my struggle is that I always prioritize quality over quantity, but this is no longer possible to do. Yeah, it's and everybody has the same struggle, and it's the same trade-off. The thing to keep in mind is you've got to go back to your strategy, what's important to the company, where you're going to have the visibility to understand what is it you should be focusing on more. What's the balance between that quality and quantity? The other thing to think about, Stella, we were talking about the behaviors that, certainly the fixed mindset behaviors where you're looking very, very junior. One thing to think about is the more senior you become, the delegation piece. because you want to give other people the opportunity to learn and grow. You want to show that you can manage people. And this isn't about, hey, I'm too busy, here, you do this. You have to bring people along. But that's going to be, you're going to have a payback for that. So in the short term, maybe a little painful, but in the longer term, not only you're going to find it self-motivating, it goes back to the human need of contribution. You're going to feel like, wow, I really helped somebody. I really gave something to somebody. I taught them the ropes. I showed them the ropes on how to do that. But you're not alone, Stella. It's something that we all struggle with, because the organizations are restructuring. They're making sure that they're lean and mean, cutting costs. So that inevitably means, cutting down on staff, and there's more to do with less people. So you got to figure out what are the things I should focus on, and then what is that parameter, more quality or more quantity on this point. But it has to be. I can't give you a blank answer. You've got to look at each situation. I can tell you a story, though, of a friend and client, Mary O'Connor. She's an insurance executive. And the reason I'm telling you the story is it was really useful to hear how she approached that question. When I interviewed her about her career success, her advice was, quote, never do a job perfectly. And think about where you're going to have the most impact in your current role, and make sure you're keeping an eye on that next role. And what you need to be doing is prioritizing in order to get that role. So looking up. And I think the way I know, we're so dedicated, or many of us are dedicated to our roles, to our managers, and you think, okay, well, I really feel committed, I feel responsible, I have to do this. But in the longer term, you're not helping anyone. You're not helping the people that work with you, for you, your department, your company, because you're limiting your own potential. And the more that you can grow, the better it is for everybody. So that's why you've got to be using these different growth strategies to make sure that you're stepping up to that leadership potential. Okay, here's a question from Fatima. Is perfection more or less relevant to different functions? Does it differ from finance function versus operations? It certainly does differ depending on the task. If you're if you're in charge of a manufacturing plant and you're making parts for the space rocket, your accuracy has to be, there's certain things that you're going to want to get to that perfection level. But there will be other things in that role that you can deprioritize. So the key is figuring out which are the ones that need that 100% level, and which ones are the ones that need the 80-20. And the function finance, I would say the same thing. Where is it? Where is the most risk, right? Which numbers are the most risk? Which are the ones, therefore, that I should spend time on? The risk-reward parameter is or trade-off. That's a really good strategy to use, as well. For both of those functions, the perfectionist tendency, you really can still think about delegating, right? Because that's gonna help you. Okay, here's a question from Mabel. How do you know the difference of having a fixed mindset and being focused on what your next move is? If you have a fixed mindset, you're not really keen on moving. You might, there might be things that you can visualize in terms of, okay, I could potentially do these other things that might be interesting, but you're always convincing yourself that, nope, it's better where I am. It's better where I am. So you're not really looking at what the next career move is. You may be saying that, but really your actions are you're just comfortable in the state of no change. Whereas if you are looking up, and it was interesting, the small percentage of you said that you didn't spend too much time, you did spend too much time kind of thinking about the next move. That's maybe the current situation is a bad situation. But I find that for professional women, generally, the vast majority spend too little time. Now, having worked in financial services for many years, I did witness some male colleagues who were like political animals. They were constantly lobbying, etc., for that next move, and then they had little respect, or people didn't respect them for the job that they were doing. They seemed to be spending way too much time. So there is a balance there. But the growth mindset, you are going to look up and you're going to look for those opportunities. Here's a question from Madalena. Hi, any tips for people dealing with very perfectionist managers? Yeah, they're tough. They're really tough to deal with. The thing to think about, Madalena, is at the end of the day, what is that manager's priority? And you have to look past the words. They may be saying that certain things are important, but you need to double check that that's actually important. So a couple suggestions. One would be, is there anyone in your company that seems to deal effectively with that manager, even if it's not like a direct reporting line thing, but they seem to have a good rapport and they seem to be able to work through issues together? See how they're doing it. If you trust that person, have a chat, but watch. Don't reinvent the wheel. See how other people are doing it. And asking around, again, watching and asking around to figure out, what makes this person tick? What is it that really matters to them? And sometimes I can visualize this happening where you get so frustrated. You can even say, hey, listen, you want A and you want B and you want both by the end of the week. That's not achievable. So think about, okay, do you need more resources? Are both of those, are they both drop deadlines? Drop dead deadlines. If they are, then we need to resource this differently. If they're not, then tell me which one is more important. That is a sensible and rational dialogue to have with your manager, instead of setting yourself up for failure where you can't do them both, or that you can't do them to the standard that's good enough. So you have to have that dialogue, and in a way, your manager is expecting you as a professional to let him or her know that, hey, I can't do this all. I used to have this running joke at the team that I was managing in my COO role, where I was like, okay, here's the top 5 priorities, and this is what we need to do. By the end of the week, we'd have our team meetings and say, okay, we're all set. And then that afternoon, I'd be like, okay, where are we? Is it done yet? I make fun of myself because I was so demanding, and we'd have a chuckle. But I've always said to the team, you need to tell me. I don't want to be surprised. Tell me where things aren't going well. Tell me where, if you're not sure which priority should take precedent. Tell me where you need more resources. So a manager, really expects that kind of feedback. So don't feel that because you've been thrown everything on your plate that's all, it's all down to you. Okay, here's a question from Heba. How can you stop being so hard on yourself? Recognizing that I won't achieve perfection is a start, but I've had this in mind for many years. Well, one thing is, you have to decide what's important to you in life, right? What are the things that are really important? And you have to start cutting other things out. Because if you still are feeling after all these years that you have to achieve perfection, you have to go back to the core. What's important to you. One thing that I realized in terms of my own superwoman syndrome was that I was prioritizing, quote, doing things over just being with my family, being with my kids. I wasn't organizing, I wasn't doing, sorting out the holiday or sorting out something with school, just spending time with them. And it really requires you to kind of go back to basics and say, okay, what's really important to me? And the relationships, I think that's another thing that I learned over the years, is that the relationships are actually the most important thing, in investing in those. Here's a question from Helen. How do you train yourself not to overthink and just do it? The best way to train yourself is to take that first step. And the more that, it's just like practice, right? And the more that you get used to taking on new things, the less scary that it becomes. And you don't overthink it. You don't think, okay, this can go wrong and that can go wrong. Let me just try it. So it's taking that first step. The example that we were talking about where, okay, you want to be super fit and then you talk yourself out of it because you're never going to be that model on the poster. So it's about breaking it down and then practice. Keep doing it. And it is scary, but then it becomes a habit. It becomes a habit, and you're going to get a lot of positive feedback, and that virtuous spiral is going to happen, and that will give you the courage to do it. The other thing in terms of quote training yourself is have a hard chat with yourself and say, okay, how happy am I where I am? How happy am I where I am? So if I'm not so happy, then I've got to do things differently. So kind of using that you're not in a satisfactory situation as a motivation to to change. So here's a question from Sarah. When there is a constant turnover in teams, how do you determine who where to spend your time in delegating? Sarah, I wish I had a really easy answer for you on that one. A very incisive question. One strategy is to give the new members of the team smaller things to get on with and see how they react. And their behavior will often be an indication on how they're going to deal with the larger challenges. The other thing, if possible, is to do a little due diligence on the new members of the team. If they came from another department, having a quiet word, or if maybe within the industry you have some connections and maybe have some feedback. That's really useful as well. But don't set yourself up for your own. Don't set yourself up for failure where you're delegating something big to somebody and you're not sure that they're ready. There's a great book called it was about the monkey on my back, and it was exactly that kind of management approach where I'm managing someone, I'm giving them a task, they'll come back and want some help. That's the monkey on my back, but then I give them guidance and then they go away again. And you do that frequency kind of coming back and forth depends on how confident you are that person's going to be able to achieve that. If you want me to dig out the specific title on that book, Sarah, just send me an email and be happy to dig that out for you. Wow, it's a few minutes past 1. Fantastic questions as usual. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now. Bye-bye.